Here with you today and to see so many men among us, because this is not a talk among women. I don't think we need to tell ourselves how great we are, because we know. Unfortunately or fortunately, we do. But I think one thing that is less clear to ourselves sometimes and to the world is the value we bring to the world, and the fact that empowered women mean better society and wealthier societies. So there is really a gap in the understanding that by the time we fight for our rights, it's really not only a self-benefiting fight, it's a fight for society. And this is something that I'm really glad to, let's say, remind ourselves, because we are in a place that creates a lot of knowledge, and a very good knowledge. And this is a bit of the message that I think we have to be more aware of and also spread around. Because sometimes you feel like preaching to the choir. We tell ourselves we are doing a lot of nice things, and this is even more the case, unfortunately, when it comes to new technologies. It seems like the fight of having more women in AI is because, well, we need our share. That's not the matter. An algorithm will be better because of the different perspective from which it's born. The kind of contribution, the kind of the angle that actually brings to optimizing an algorithm. And you're talking to actually a person that has done AI. Now, I don't have the time for it. And that I will never forget, there was an IEEE conference. And I was with my husband, who's an engineer. Nobody's perfect. And then I was sitting and discussing optimizing strategies. And the guy looks at me and says, hey, I have a good one. Do you know what artificial intelligence is? Now, look at me before I gave you the answer that he gave to me. I was like, tell me, what is the joke? Well, it's a blonde girl dyeing her hair black. I was like, now what I'm supposed to do with you, right? Anyway, so this is the context in which, unfortunately, too often we operate as women. And this is how much we are underestimated in our abilities and capabilities. So let me put a bit of numbers in the back, because sometimes I feel also the discussion doesn't get through the way we should, because we don't have the analysis and the hard numbers in the back. And this is what UNESCO has been trying to do very, very adamantly, because then in front of clear numbers, in front of clear evidence, it becomes much more difficult to say this is a non-problem, which is what we heard so far. And we continue to hear, for instance, in relation to quotas, right? That is like, why should they be there? Because if you're smart, automatically you will get to the position, well, no, there is such a thing for us called the glass ceiling, that for men doesn't exist. So no, sorry, at equal skills, equal ability, equal experience, unfortunately, and that's what our colleagues were saying before, the person that is going to be selected is a man. But we have some solution for that as well, and you will see there. And actually, it's an easy and cheap solution. So the policies that can make women more empowered are not necessarily costly, which is another false myth that is given out there, like, sorry, in tight budget, we cannot really devote money to gender policies. Gender policies should be mainstream, so it's not putting a different policy. It's improving the different policies from the inside. So we know, unfortunately, that by the time it comes to technology, we are not very much there, not very often to be seen. And some analysis I did some years ago actually shows that by the time we are there, so at that point, R was leading the game in terms of software. And we were looking at the top 300,000 contributors. We got all the algorithms to see who was working with whom. So to start with, there were very, very few women in the network that we pictured. But then they were sparse and far away. So they were not in the core development they were developed. So that means that there is not only an issue of entry, there is an issue of positioning. And this is true in software as it is in many other, especially technical realms alike. You will see I wave my hand very silly today because I don't want to spoil this that I just did, but just as a disclaimer, okay? So, and what we know also from evidence that UNESCO has been contributed, and this is why I said numbers, evidence, that we like it or not, they matter. And they matter for policy because then you can set targets. You can set action to assess effectiveness. Without them, it becomes all very fussy, and we go back in the sphere where it is very difficult to defend our cause. And we also know that by the time it comes to research, I was just hearing before, we're not very much there in terms of not only the research, but also the position. And actually, this is completely counterintuitive, given the numbers we have out there now for many years about educational performance of girls and boys. Frankly, it's very difficult to understand why, if girls have outperformed boys for a number of years now, why by the time we go into the position, the good ones are always to the men. So are you really telling me that we are selecting, well, we are basically deliberately doing adverse selection? So this is a question that we might want to ask and raise the voice about. Now, the numbers go, unfortunately, even lower by the time we look at software developers. But what we did, because it's not about only entry. This is a problem, entering into specific markets, companies, and especially in the tech world, generally speaking. But the question is, really, are we satisfied with entry? Don't we deserve leadership? And leadership has been proven. I mean, there are a number of studies out there that mixed environments, very diversified one, are overperforming very narrow and very, selected, let's put it like that, ones. Now, again, this is not a discourse against the men. This is not the way it should be intended. It's to work with men because also men are under huge pressures, huge stereotypes that they have to abide by that actually limit their possibilities. And that's why UNESCO has this fantastic, and I'm really happy that we did this work together, the fantastic Transforming Mentalities program. It is about getting rid of the toxic masculinities and let everybody bloom the way they want to be. We are all humans. It doesn't really mean, it shouldn't mean anything, shouldn't matter. And so what we see is that by the time we look, in this case, you see on the left-hand side what are the pie charts related to the top 10 tech companies, the top 100 tech companies. And I mean, I think you see the numbers by yourself. Unfortunately, the slice of the cake, let's put it like that is given to us is way too small. Also because, again, competence-wise, it means that society is wasting talents. It's just wasting this. And then we went much deeper into the story for a selected number of companies, the top 7, right? To see the ones that some call the magnificent. I wouldn't call them that way, but that's the way the literature, especially in the newspapers, have put them, to see where they are. Well, you can see it for yourself that at most, when we are lucky, it gets to 40%, but surely not in the top positions. So there is an imbalance, and then by the time you see the shape of the blue, you can get by yourself how small the percentage goes by the time we go into what is typically called the C-suite, so really the top positions, the ones that have the decision to change, the power to take decisions that can change the reality, and then we're not there. We are not allowed to be there. And sometimes when we are appointed, and this is, I think, a very sad finding of recent literature, by the time we are appointed, it's because they know the situation is so difficult that the likelihood of failing is very high, and therefore they put a woman as a CEO, as a vice president on a very tricky thing, so that if she fails, it's like, yeah, I told you, women cannot fix things. So that's really sad, because that is deliberately done in order to discredit the ability of women, which is not. I mean, I would like to see men put in that condition, and then we do the counterfactual, and then we start discussing. Now, the other thing that we did is, when it comes to innovation, of course, patents is one of the ways you can look at that. And we wanted to see, okay, we already saw some years ago in some other analysis how much women were or not present in the different technological fields, and how much they were allowed also to enter the teams that then get the patents. Why is this important? Well, you might discuss whether patent is a good proxy. Maybe in some cases, less in other cases. Perhaps with AI, they're more of a backward-looking type of measure. However, there are money associated to that. Depends on companies, depends on countries. It's a funny mix of combination of framework conditions. But by the time you own a patent, your salary increases, your career expectation increase, because there is an external validation of your capabilities, kind of. Your potential to be remunerated or to be tasked with the responsibility changes. And that's why we look at it, even if, let's say, it's an imperfect proxy of innovation output. And then again, you can see for yourself that the shares are not very nice. We are about overall across AI, and I think this is also the somehow good result of push to see where are the women, that we are at about 30. on average, from the patterns that we are able to identify as being clearly AI. Because let me also remind all of us that unfortunately now, given the importance of artificial intelligence, everybody claims everything is artificial intelligence. Even the algorithm that just uses Excel and puts a bit of a numbers. So, there is a different thing there, and so we have to be very careful when trying to identify. So if we are conservative in our analysis and we really identify through a number of also AI leverage technique, really the patterns that are AI, well, the presence of women is not really there yet. And so, again, another proof that when it comes to getting the payoff, we are not that entitled, and we are not considered to be there. And you can find much more about this in this report. Actually, this is the second of a series that is gender-based resilience. What we decided that under the leadership of our ADG Ramos, Assistant Director General, she's a feminist, but, all the best you can find, and she's really cooperative. She really empowers all of us. And I heard before, and that's a sad experience that I lived in the past, that sometimes your women bosses can be very nasty to you, being the women employee. So that's not what happens with us. And we said, well, okay, we really have to demonstrate with the numbers why and how much it matters to have women in the, empowered on all sectors, because that makes the life of everybody else better off and the economy better off. So last year we went for the framework model, showing also issues related to violence against women, etc. But this year we took 3 angles, and I would invite you to have a look at that. And this is about leadership. Leadership in companies, some of the results I showed you. Leadership in policy. Who decides? Are we allowed to decide? We even went down to looking at ministries. Who gets the ministries with portfolios, not the one that just have the title ministry, then you don't have the resources to do anything, right? When, how many? Is there a consequence in the appointments? So this all matters, because if we are not put in the position to express our need and our views, this world is not going to change much. And we will continue to perpetuate. And again, we are at a university that is brilliant. And really, I will invite you to take any time you have here as a student, as a researcher, to nurture yourself and nurture the word. But too often, I hear a narrative that really displeases me. And this is the narrative that, if women are not that involved in the tech realm, is that because they're not there in terms of skills? So ultimately, the problem is us. We are technophobic. We are not assertive. And by the time you are, you're bossy. So, there is a problem there. And then you don't have the ability to, to be as flexible as other men. You don't have the ability to stand out for your ideas. Well, that's called compromise. It's a different skill. But it's not tagged that way. And so the problem continues to be us, and we are not. And this is what we should be very clear about. So, as we said, and I heard the previous discussion, indeed, LLMs are just one type of AI. There are many others. Unfortunately, do risk, and it's not a risk, a reality, to amplify bias that already exist and create new ones. Why? This is not because the programmers are bad people. That's not the point. The point is the data on which they are trained, the check and balances that may or might not be in there, and the external assessment. So if you don't check whether the algorithms are trained on data that actually representative of the population, and let me do a step back, to that we have some way to go. Think about data in health. For a number of reasons that are socioeconomical, women have a lower likelihood to be treated. So of course, by the time you look at patient history, you will find much more men. And therefore, the expectation, the prediction, the analysis will be based on data that are about men. And so by the time we get a heart attack, nobody has a clue about whether that symptom is really a heart attack or it's just a pain that you can get because you slept badly that night. So there are all these first-order magnitude effects that are transferred into the system. But there is also a bit of a responsibility of the programmers that is, unfortunately, and this is something that UNESCO is working very much to improve. Anybody that is trained in technical skills like programming, computer science, now prompt engineers that are going soon to vanish, I will talk to you about that later, they are not given any training on ethics. They can't be bothered of whether the data are balanced. They can't be bothered about whether to run fast, they consume an amazing amount of energy because the algorithm is simply not optimized on, CPU use and all the rest of it. I mean, think about all the parameters that you need to take into account. And for sure, they don't check whether it's equal representativeness, despite the fact that these days we have something called synthetic content and synthetic data that make it very cheap to balance data sets in the absence of observation or in the scarcity of them. So it's a bit of lack of awareness, lack of education, and also lack of willingness to do something. Now, with generative AI, creating algorithms that check on other algorithms is becoming so cheap that really there is no reason for not taking the extra step and double check and put checkpoints and put in verification. And this is something actually that UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence puts very clearly. The need to have, at the end of the chain, human oversight. You cannot let the AI algorithms decide by themselves. The redressal. These are words that sometimes when you say that, it's like, what is that? It means simply that if there is harm, because yes, we can check, we can do our best, and even, in Italy we say, I'm Italian, with that name, I think it's difficult to be from anywhere else, but we say that hell is full of good intentions. So even with the best intentions, things can go wrong, right? So the redressal principle contained in this normative instrument that 194 member states around the world have actually adopted, which means really this is a leveling the playing field type of instrument. It says that by the time there is harm, first you stop it, because if there is harm, you don't continue to do it. You have mechanism to avoid that in the first place, but last, you see how to redress it. You have to compensate, you have to fix, you have to solve a situation, because it's not fair, it's not ethically fair to really hurt people. So technology should be at the service of society, not the other way around. And let me point out one thing that is very, very important of this word ethics, because sometimes in the international discourse, and I'm the one that has been following the last G20, working with the Digital Economy Working Group from UNESCO side, we see an objection to the word ethics, as if it were philosophical, with no disrespect to the philosophers in the room. That is like, a concept that this and that, and sorry, but this is not my values. My culture doesn't get there. Well, if anything, the concepts of responsible, trustworthy are much more volatile than ethics, because in the preface of the recommendation, all the countries agreed to a very clear definition of ethics. That is, upholds is something that upholds human rights. The Charter of Human Rights has been signed by all countries. Human dignity, fundamental element, and fundamental freedoms. So you cannot social score me. And countries will have to demonstrate what they have done in order to go in that direction. Because it's not, and we go back to the discrimination issue, it is not fair to use the technology to put me aside just because one day I was in a rush and I needed to cross the zebra crossing with a red light, right? Or I'm going to be discriminated not to have any health insurance because I'm a person that unfortunately doesn't have good health conditions. And so if anything, the harm is even bigger. And so this is why we are so adamant about, and I heard algorithmic bias, how to fix it. And yes, it's true, it's not the only solution. But from a compounded set of solutions, the solution is very much there and can be applied. We need the willingness. And yesterday we were with the startups in Bangalore. Let's stop thinking that there's an opposition between people and companies. At the end of the day, companies want to make money, with all my respect to all the company representatives here. If customers trust the technology, if customers are happy, they can do even more money. So at the end of the day, it's one of those occasions in which we all win. Some of us might have different motivation from the others, but the important thing is that it does good to us and doesn't harm us. It's put at our service. Let me put this one on because I just want to mention a study that we're going to launch in the context of the forthcoming AI Action Summit that is taking place in France at the beginning of February, 10 and 11 of February, and is about a big shift in the technology that is going to impact all of us, and women perhaps to a greater extent. And is that, well, to start with already, studies up to 2023 were finding out that, well, they had a kind of a positive view on the technology, which we also have. I'm a positive thinker, and I think AI can really help us in many ways. If we choose it the right way, and we use it the right way. Now, what you see there is the augmenting potential. So who is AI supposed to help, given where women, for instance, are in the labor market? And so you can see that, well, when it comes to helping, AI seemingly is going to help all of us to the same extent, which is a very nice thing to think about. By the time we think about automation potential, the story changes. Already the automation potential is higher for this technology, and that was the case in 2023, with relation to actually jobs that are mainly in the hands of women. So the augmentation effect is more or less similar. The substitution effect is going to be detrimental for women, which, of course, it's a question for policy that policy should start thinking now. What has happened from 2023? This year, and those of you who are in computer science have surely seen it, there has been a twofold development in parallel, and taken together can be even more impactful. The first one is agentic tools. What does it mean? LLMs or other approaches that talk to other LLMs to solve a full problem. Say, financial agent. So you don't need to have a person there that is specialized full-time. You need only this person to do the oversight, and also that requires different new competencies, perhaps higher competencies, to be able to supervise these very powerful LLMs. But frankly, you don't need this kind of figure anymore 100%. So you might have a pool of companies, think about small and medium enterprises, sharing. So purchasing a software that does a financial agent is like you have a financial expert with you all the time, and having to go to the in-person financial expert once a month, or just to check on some of the decisions that you doubt about, insofar as you have the skills to be able to distinguish that, because that's another problem. This is the first development. The second development is actually local AI. That is, we have a number of solutions now that can be just put on your laptop, and you don't need to have a particularly powerful one, and apply AI and for a number of functions. Now, this, if you look at it from the point of view of economic performance, can be extremely empowering. Because now, even small and medium enterprises that have been the ones that have been having a very hard time scaling up or going through the markets, will have tools that help them take decisions that are informed by high-level skills, basically, that are the ones behind the program. On the other hand, means that, well, to start with, a number of positions can be made redundant. The analysis we have in this forthcoming AI landscape report is a bit of, and allow me, quote unquote, of the title, revenge of the blue collars. If anything, the ones that are going to be impacted is all of us. Those having, in theory, very high competencies, very high educational level, and people that do creative jobs. Because remember that what had happened before the 2023 was the mainstreaming of generative AI. So the three together, with the agentic tools and the local developments, can have a lot of consequences. Now, on the good side, if I have local AI, I'm more frugal. The environmental impact of AI is much less detrimental for the environment. Let's not forget that by the time we prompt generative AI to do a nice picture for us, we are consuming a big deal of energy and a lot of water to cool down the servers. So even for the fun of it, I see many people doing it. And it's like, yeah, it would be good to have a definition. We are working with that, with ISO and with the French Ministry for the Environment, to get a general agreement of what is the footprint of not only the carbon footprint, but the environmental cost of AI, because there are too many, again, the necessity of having clear indicators. There is too much saying out there that AI consumes tons or grams, right? And so this discussion, this polarization of the discussion doesn't help than taking action because it questions the validity of the argument in the first place. And this is what we want to get rid of. So this is now, this is actually an answer to the person that was commenting before about recruitment. This is a study that I did with some colleagues a year ago, and that we took to the G20 Brazil presidency, which actually refers to it. And what is it about? Solutions to have gender empowerment don't need to be costly and don't need to be very hard. So again, AI in this case was put at the service of society, at the service of women empowerment, and we scanned for 6 countries in English because that was the first study of the first attempt to see whether it would work. We scanned the literature to understand what is the language that is discriminatory against women. Then we went on online job posting and checked the language used, tagging it as masculine or feminine. Feminine would typically include words like cooperative, dialogue, etc. The masculine will be you're an assertive, you're empowered, you're competitive, you're very flexible, these kind of things. Now, what we see, the result says it very clearly. And you see here, it's almost symmetric and it's really funny. So, this has a first order magnitude effect over the likelihood or not of women to apply for a certain job by the time masculine terms are in high presence. And this is the case in tech jobs. So first, argument. We need to fix it. It is very much the case. It's really putting off women by the time we talk about going up the ladder in the career. So we do have evidence because then we match these positions with data from LinkedIn about where people are going, what is their career progression, and try to see, okay, was this person stuck in that position? Did this person manage to go up the ladder? And so we see very clear that, no. Masculine terms actually hurt. Women don't feel welcome. Women get clear the message that this is not for you, sorry, don't apply. And they don't participate. And then the other thing that we see here is that men, conversely, are not put off by the female language. So the likelihood of applying remains the same. So, long story short, don't use them. It suffices a country to say, look, this, and this other term are not supposed to be used, or the equivalent thereof. Companies, as they say in France, débrouillez-vous, okay, do it now. And it's easy. It's just a matter of wording, and can go a long way. So this is very important. Now, the recommendation I mentioned has a number of policies, and you would recognize one, number 6, which is gender. So what do we do? In the recommendation that tells countries what are the principles you're going to abide by that I mentioned to you already, and also the key values that all countries agreed to uphold, well, then we have to take it to policy. And there are a number of policy areas that need to be involved in this structural change. And we underlined 2 horizontal features. One is gender, and the other one is the environment. That is, whatever you do, whether you're talking about education, research, labor, technology, data protection, etc., bring a gender angle in that, okay? And bring a sustainability angle in that. Because especially for the latest development I talked to you about, what we see is lowering the cost of the adoption, which means greater adoption, but with that come the environmental constraint. So we have to start thinking about it now, not just afterwards as an afterthought. So this is the way the recommendation looks like, let's say the document that I invite all of you to read. And as you can see, I just highlighted here a few. It tells already government, based on expert advice and the agreement of countries, what they're supposed to do. From quota to avoid that they are translated into system, the biases, to having women in the life cycle of the systems, gender diversity in AI, let's think differently, let's approach problems differently. And in order to actually make it concrete, we developed this network that I'm really happy that you're going to have the Southeast Asian chapter here, that is the Women for Ethical AI. That is, women that are already in AI under different positions, lawyers, tech experts, economists, etc., that put themselves at the service of advancing the cause, but also inform the other chapters of the recommendation, showing exactly what I was saying before about the contribution of women to societies and economies. And so we really look forward to having you together under your able leadership, working on this very important for ourselves and for society endeavor, because we need to change the game now before it becomes too late, and we are put outside of this. So in order to inform countries of where they are and what they need to do, we have done what we call the readiness assessment methodology. This tool is like taking a snapshot of institutions, legislation, the stakeholders, and what it's telling us is like, where are you? Because there is a very wrong assumption that is made typically, that is, developed countries are much better off than developing countries in this. The answer is no. There is no such a thing as a perfect country. Some of them have some institutions that work, others don't. At times, very often we see coordination being a big issue in anything we do about AI. And we also see that there is an awareness by civil servants about, let's say, the challenges, the opportunities, and when they are supposed to ask experts to jump into the conversation. So we have about now 60 countries. I'm sorry to see that it got all moved in the format here, but it's fine. And actually, we are starting another 15. So we are almost covering half of the world for the moment, and the big ones are in there, including India. Actually, that's why I came also, and we were in Bangalore to do one of the regional assessment that Eun Song, my colleague from the Delhi office that is here with me today, and actually brought me here, and I'm so pleased to be here. To really activate power and capacity everywhere they are and to make the networks. Because one thing we miss as women is networks. The old men clubs are very solid and very established. I haven't seen yet an old women clubs, which I would love to see, me included, but also the young women clubs, you know. So, I mean, let's do it. And this is a paper, actually, since I knew there was IEEE in the game here, this is a paper that we published with our ADG and with a colleague on IEEE computer, because there is this awareness raising that is needed in the computing world. Because, I mean, our colleagues that program, whether men or women, whatever, they're not bad, they're simply not aware. So let's start by raising awareness. And, you know, this is to say, let's do this together. None of us can do it alone, but we can all for sure do our little bit. And together, that little bit is not additive, it's multiplicative. So let's do it. Thank you very much.
So, hello, thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation, and your energy and your passion comes out in this. I'm just wondering, what do you think, you know, if we're not getting enough females in tech? I've been in tech for 30 years, and it is tough. There's the glass ceiling, and it's really hard to move up. And then getting girls interested in STEM. So it seems like the people are interested more now, not in engineering STEM. They're really going over for biotech and other kinds of STEM that help humanity versus pure tech. And I think this is part of the problem. So how do we resolve this on a global basis? What are some of the recommendations?
I don't know if it's working, otherwise I'll go there. Is it working? Yeah. Actually, what you're referring to is something that we have seen for some time, although now with a more computational effect, in the sense that since a long time, since the 80s, by the time you saw women in the research world, they were tending to be in bio. Perhaps that has to do, and I mean, the analysis we did says that has to do with stereotypes, the appropriateness of a job for a woman. That goes towards the idea of caring. In biotech, you look for solution for people, if for illnesses or for, for the well-being of people. So it goes into that direction that, and this also was why before you had a lot of nurses, but not very doctors. So it's really the care, the empathy, and by the time we start saying, look, why not? We should go also for the high position, not only to serve in the middle of the curve. That's when we move to have more doctors that are women and not only nurses. But this is something that we have already seen. And this is the bias in the belief, but it's our self-constraining way, because we have been taught by our parents that you can't have a job where, by 4 p.m. you're not at home, because otherwise your kids will not see you. And this is so ingrained in our mentality.
Yeah, you have to be home to cook dinner, you have to see the kid, you have to make sure they study.
And so if you are in maths, if you are in tech, and you are there until late because they have these meetings, you can't. So biotech is a safer thing, because it's about being in a lab, in addition, hidden. That's the other component, like you're in the back office, kind of. You're not in front discussing, and that's why it suits you better. Like, you know, why we should be in education. Now, thanks God we are in education, but that's a different thing.
Thank you very much for your very energetic presentation. And I think I can feel the transmission, you know, the energy being shared. You shared that number matters. I agree. So when we are talking about quantity, we sometimes, or most of the times, forget about the quality. Especially whenever we do some program or projects or anything education related or even women in STEAM, we focus so much on quantity that quality get ignored. So that is what my personal experience. So can't we take both together? Like we need both quantity and quality and keep it together, you know. So whenever we focus on only quantity, you know, like, okay, female participation should be more than 50%. That is what USAID, any programs that says. And then they look only the numbers, right? So I'm saying that why don't we also make some quality, like you were saying about the leadership or the program who is designing it or co-generating some programs. So participation over there as well. So that is what just my concern. Thank you.
May I have your definition of quality?
Quality is like, for example, if you are having some, let's say, a workshop, and then all participations, like community people, they are only attending. But what about the presentation or sharing, leadership, designing the program itself? So like a team who designed the program, executes the program, or make a presentations there, so those are the part also. And even like, for example, if we are just counting for the numbers, then we forget, whether we are really representing and transmitting whatever we are trying to do it. So that is what quality I'm referring to.
I mean, the idea of quantity is never at the detriment of quality, that's for sure, because otherwise, the maths don't add. Now, let me tell you one thing, because the quality argument is something that's why the first question I had for you was like, define me quality. I mean, you're talking to an econometrician, so that was the obvious question to ask you. But, and this is because of the following. I myself have been a bit upset by the discussion on quotas. Because, of course, I don't like to be in a panel because I'm a woman, right? I want to be in that panel because I'm a recognized scientist, economist, call it as you want, and not because I am a woman of certain characteristics in addition. Having said that, unfortunately, and I mean for the economists in the room, this might mean a lot, there is endogeneity in this problem. And that endogeneity needs to be broken through concrete actions. And what I'm referring is the following. Let me tell you another funny story. My boss at ADG Ramos is Mexican, and she has been fighting, and she has been really successful at the time she was at the OECD to have Mexico have quota in parliament representative. Without that, you wouldn't have the female president you have today, because women were not in the picture. Now, one of the more senior people in the room, I'm told the story, I mean, I don't know whether I'm represented it very accurately, but the bottom of the line is that, said, discussing with the colleague, oh my God, now we have an influx of incompetent women. Because from all of a sudden we go from 0 to 50, and we have to let anything, happen there. And her response, which I think was very, very smart, is like, well, what's the difference? We are full of incompetent men, so you won't realize the difference. This is to say that in some cases, in order to break the flow, because let's not forget the existence of very established networks. If you are going for dinner because your wife is at home with the kids every evening and you are the top professor, I mean, I'm not talking to you specifically, but let's say this is what you see in many universities. You have this bulk of top, the dean, the vice dean, you name it, altogether 90% of them being men. And by the time they go and they take deliberations, they're only among themselves. How do you think a woman will enter that solid group? Unless you impose it. So at some point, unfortunately, what might look like a kind of an aggressive measure is needed, because otherwise the endogeneity problem is never solved. And I mean, I have to fight this even with my husband. They say, well, I would love to have curricula with no gender on the top. I don't care. I just take the most skilled. Yes and no, in the sense that sometimes what happens is that you're not given the possibility to get that type of specific education because of the network, because of the accession, because of the selectivity. So at some point, quality is very important. We don't want to give it out. But if the world is what it is, and the statistics says that, well, in theory, laws of the big numbers, the intelligence is equally distributed between men and women, there is a lot of the part of that tail that we are neglecting. And we want to get all the one to start with the last decile, and then with all the rest. Because, I mean, why should we have, if we have 70% of the men that work, they're not all the smart ones. It's a simple mathematical thing. So, I'm sorry to say, but we have to consider this.